Welcome back, everyone, to The Price of Business. Your host today, Bill Knapik here. And our next guest is Mr. Richard Bistrong. He is a writer and speaker. Richard, thank you, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Bill. Thank you, and thank you for having me on the show today.
Well, it's our pleasure. Boy, you have an interesting story. First of all, Richard, tell people about, as a writer and speaker, tell them what you write about and what you talk about.
Well, for the most part, Bill, I talk about what was a decade of spending my career as an international sales vice president, spending 250 days a year overseas, pretty well dispersed throughout the globe, living and residing and working out of the United Kingdom for part of that time, and what it's like as a sales executive to confront overseas corruption in my work. That is a subject that's not all that unusual in Houston, where you have a number of oil and gas firms that have also had to deal with this issue.
So that's very interesting. A lot of, I guess, most people may think there's not much corruption, or they may not even think about the corruption that's involved in business in general, but certainly overseas business.
Particularly, and where you can run afoul of the law, Bill, is there's a U.S. law called the FCPA, which deals specifically with the conduct with respect to bribing an overseas foreign official, a public official, so someone who works for a state institution or foreign government, to either win or retain business. That's against U.S. law, and there are a number of other international bribery conventions that also prevent it in other countries.
And when we talk, Richard, about this kind of bribery and corruption, what are the dollar figures that are in play in this kind of situation?
You know, Bill, there's a real continuum of that, and it goes from what's often called petty bribery or small bribes, which might be paying an inspection official or a procurement or customs official, maybe what we might consider to be a small amount of money to maybe move paperwork forward or, expedite a specific process, or maybe do something that he normally would or she normally wouldn't do. So that's what we might consider petty corruption. And then there's grand corruption. And then we're speaking about usually at the higher level of state ministries. And, we can be talking about significant amounts of money to win what could be a very large piece of business.
Interesting. An image that comes to my mind that in a small way, it's kind of like if you're going to a show. I remember once going to see Frank Sinatra many years ago, and we gave that maitre d' $50 so we can have a better seat. This is on a bigger scale.
Right. You take that on a bigger scale and in a public arena, you could be in trouble.
No doubt about it. And, of course, I don't think there was a law against what we did. But that's
No.
That's fascinating. Now, Richard, and this kind of corruption, so you speak to groups and organizations. In fact, you have something coming up here in Houston, right?
Yes, I have a number of events, Bill, coming up in Houston. Some of them specifically geared toward oil and gas legal and compliance personnel.
So then that actually helps. Here in Houston, we have so many oil and gas companies. That helps them stay on the right side of the law and play by the rules.
And more importantly, Bill, is to try to help them understand. Bill, I was well educated. I have a master's degree from the University of Virginia. I was well compensated. I didn't need to take any risk, yet I ended up spending 14 months in a federal prison as a result of foreign bribery offenses. So I try to get people who might sit in the C-suite in comfortable offices to understand what it's like to work in a remote office, often unsupervised, where you're thinking about the pressure to perform, to meet quotas, to meet your forecasts, and, of course, to make your bonus, what that looks like and how that interplays when you confront a corrupt individual and corrupt transactions overseas, and maybe try to help them with some tipping points to keep people's behavior to the right side of the law.
It sounds like there might be an environment in some situations in countries where they might want to sugarcoat it or say, "Oh, this is how we do it here. It's no big deal." Does that happen?
Bill, that's really a great question, and that's where you start to think of corruption as the norm. An organizational psychologist called it the cocoon of corruption. And that's where people can really run into trouble, is when you just start to think this is how things get done around here. And organizations really need to be very supportive in how they're compensating people, how they're training people, what type of business growth they're forecasting. And maybe, Bill, it's a region where corruption is so widespread that an organization might think twice about putting resources there or even developing business, as knowing that it would be a zero-sum game. You can't grow your business and be ethical in a particular country. So if you can't do both, maybe you need a clear-eyed decision about getting in there in the first place.
And very interesting. And as you were saying about being in these locations, you describe an environment of temptation, as I see it. But you actually spent time incarcerated for 14 months, right?
I did. So I had 14 months to really think about this and to think about sort of what were the behavioral components. What was I thinking when I did this? Not as a scapegoat or not as a way to deflect my own conduct, because I knew it was illegal at the time I was doing it. So there's no justification for it. But how could I break it down in a way that might help others?
So, and of course, obviously, that gave you a lot of time to think. I mean, give us another word, what it was like to be in without your freedom. I mean, people fear that. I know I would. But what was that like?
Well, it's very difficult, especially on a family. I mean, there's no good time to be out of your children's lives for 14 months. I missed my daughter applying to graduate school and my son applying to undergraduate school. It's hard to be a dad and a husband at 300 phone minutes per month. But, you know, my family really was supportive, and, you know, we came out the other side. I became an English as a second language instructor and a GED tutor at the federal prison camp in Lewisburg. So I tried to use my time to help other people that maybe didn't have the educational resources that I had, so that maybe when they get out, they have a better chance of not reoffending and staying out of prison and being back with their families.
Well, I would also think, and I'm looking at your website, richardbistrong.com, for those listening. It's a great website, and it looks like you have taken this as an opportunity to help others. And the website is so great as far as showing people all the things that you do and the speaking engagements and everything else. I mean, it's phenomenal.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. And, you know, hopefully people realize this is not a victimless crime. I mean, I was ethically numb out there, and I try to talk about, you know, how bribery has real victims. And it doesn't always seem that way from business class lounges and nice inner city hotels, but I try to elevate that as well for the benefit of frontline personnel. Well,
very nice. And people can reach you through your website, right, Richard?
Anytime. I appreciate that.
Richard Bistrong, and that's BISTRONG.com. Richard, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, my pleasure, Bill. Thank you again.
And we'll look forward to seeing you in Houston. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to The Price of Business. Your host today, Bill Knapik. We're going to take a short break and come right back with even more.